The emergency council session was unlike anything in galactic history. Thousands of representatives watched as Admiral Tae-Won Kim's hologram appeared in the center of the chamber. The human looked exactly like the old forbidden records described. 2 arms, 2 legs, hair on the head, and eyes that seemed to see right through you. Counselor Vreth stepped forward to speak, preparing a diplomatic greeting. Admiral Kim held up one hand to stop him. The human said his voice was direct and harsh. 5,000 years ago, your council decided we were too dangerous to keep around. We fought your war. We saved your civilizations from the Devourers, and as thanks you erased us from history and told us to leave. The chamber was completely silent. Several council members looked uncomfortable. Others looked confused. Kim continued speaking. We could have fought back then. We could have said no. But we chose to leave peacefully because we understood your fear. You looked at human history and saw violence. You saw our weapons and our wars and decided we were too unpredictable. So we went home. We closed our borders. And we watched. He paused, letting that sink in. We have been watching the galaxy for 5,000 years. We saw you build your peace. We saw you prosper. And we saw the Devourers waking up again 3 years ago. We have been preparing for their return because we knew you could not handle them alone. Not with your current military technology. Vreth found his voice. Admiral Kim, on behalf of the council, I apologize for what happened. Kim interrupted. Save it. Apologies mean nothing right now. The Devourers are back and they are stronger than before. They have had 5,000 years to evolve and adapt. Your energy weapons barely hurt them. Your ships cannot match their speed. Your tactics are designed for fighting other council species, not an enemy that wants to consume every living thing in the galaxy. He stepped closer to the hologram projector. This is what is going to happen. We are going to help you. We are going to fight the Devourers and we are going to win. But when this is over, humanity gets a seat on this council. We get equal rights. We get respect. And you never try to make us disappear again. Agreed, it was not really a question. The council voted unanimously to accept. Captain Ji-Woo Park stood on the bridge of the destroyer Relentless, studying tactical displays of the planet Corvin. Intelligence reports showed heavy Devourer presence there. Thousands of bioships orbited the world. The local population of 3 billion was trapped on the surface. Park was younger than most ship captains at 34 years old. She had earned her position through tactical brilliance during the colony wars in human space. Now she had a chance to prove herself against the galaxy's ultimate enemy. She told her bridge crew that Admiral Kim wanted them to take Corvin. He wanted the council to see what human tactics could do. So they would give them a show they would never forget. The human fleet approached Corvin in formation. Park's destroyer group led the advance while battleships and carriers hung back. The Devourers detected them immediately and moved to intercept. Thousands of organic ships that looked like they were made of muscle and bone. Park ordered all ships to open fire. She told them to show the Devourers what Earth could do. The battle began with the scream of railguns. Solid metal rods accelerated to incredible speeds tore through Devourer bioships. Unlike energy weapons, the projectiles punched completely through their targets, destroying them from the inside. The Devourers tried to adapt, tried to grow thicker armor, but the kinetic weapons did not care. Physics could not be evolved away. Park watched her tactical display with satisfaction. She ordered missiles to launch in pattern delta. Hundreds of missiles streaked from the human ships. These were not simple explosives. Some carried nuclear warheads. Others had cluster munitions. A few contained experimental weapons designed specifically for organic targets. They hit the Devourer formations like a hammer, creating massive explosions that lit up space. But the Devourers were adapting quickly. They learned to dodge some missiles. They started using their own bodies as shields. Park smiled grimly. This was exactly what she expected. The Devourers were intelligent. That meant they could be predicted. She calmly ordered Phase 2 to execute. Launch the fighters. The council species watching the battle were confused at first. Fighters? Small attack craft were considered outdated in modern warfare. Most council fleets had given them up centuries ago in favor of long-range weapons. But human fighters were different. They moved with impossible speed and agility, piloted by humans who had trained their entire lives for combat. The small ships swarmed through the Devourer formations like angry insects shooting at weak points, targeting biological systems that sensors identified as vital. The Devourers could not track them all. They could not adapt fast enough. Park watched the battle unfold exactly as she had planned. Railguns for the big targets, missiles for area denial, fighters for precision strikes. Combined arms warfare that the Devourers could not counter because they were facing too many different threats at once. Within 3 hours, Corvin's orbit was clear. The Devourer fleet was destroyed, but the fight was not over. Lieutenant Sung-Ho Choi checked his armor seals one final time before boarding the dropship. Around him, 200 Marines did the same. They were about to attempt something no Council species had tried in this war. Ground combat against Devourer forces. Choi was 29 years old and had joined the military after raiders destroyed his family's colony. He learned to fight because he never wanted to feel helpless again. Now he was leading Marines into what might be the hardest battle of the war. He shouted to his troops. The Devourers had landed organisms on Corvin's surface. They were trying to convert the population. Their job was to stop them. They would go in fast, hit hard, and not stop until every last creature was dead. Remember your training. Watch your sectors, and trust your squad mates. The dropships fell through Corvin's atmosphere like meteors. They landed in the middle of the planet's capital city. What Choi saw when the doors opened made his blood run cold. The Devourers had been busy. Parts of the city were covered in organic material that pulsed like it was alive. Creatures that looked like combinations of different animals wandered the streets. These were things that had once been people. The Devourers consumed life and twisted it into new forms. Choi ordered all units to advance. Flamethrower teams would burn everything that moved. Everyone else would provide cover fire. The Marines moved through the city like a wave of destruction. Their weapons were not fancy energy beams. They used bullets, explosives, and fire, simple, brutal, and effective. The Devourer creatures rushed at them mindlessly. The Marines cut them down without mercy. Choi led his squad into a building where sensors detected survivors. They found civilians huddled in a basement, terrified and starving. An alien child no more than 5 years old looked up at him with huge eyes. Choi knelt down and said softly that it was okay. They were here to help. The child was safe now. The child's parent, a reptilian alien similar to Counselor Vreth, stared at Choi's armor. "You are human? The legends are true?" Choi nodded. "Very true. Now come on, we need to get you to the evacuation zone." The ground battle lasted 2 days. The Marines fought block by block, building by building. They lost soldiers, good people who died protecting aliens they had never met before, but they kept pushing forward because that is what humans did. They protected those who could not protect themselves. When the last Devourer organism was destroyed, Choi stood in the city square with his remaining troops. They were exhausted, injured, and covered in blood. But they had won. They had saved millions of lives. Commander Nexeth arrived with Council relief forces. He stared at the human Marines in awe. "You went down there. You fought them on the ground. We thought that was impossible." Choi removed his helmet and wiped sweat from his face. "Nothing is impossible, Commander. You just have to be willing to do whatever it takes." Back on the indomitable Will, Admiral Kim received reports from across the fleet. Corvin was liberated. Casualties were acceptable. Ammunition expenditure was within projections. The battle had been a complete success, but Kim did not celebrate. He studied intelligence reports with Dr. Hayren Lee, the fleet's chief scientist. She had been analyzing the Devourer remains. Dr. Lee said quietly that the Devourers were different from the records. 5,000 years ago, Devourers were aggressive but predictable. These new ones were smarter. They adapted during the battle. They learned from human tactics. Kim nodded slowly. He had noticed. They retreated before the humans could completely destroy them. They got the data they wanted. Dr. Lee asked what that meant. The Admiral pulled up a star map showing Devourer activity across the galaxy. It meant this was just a test. They wanted to see what we could do. The real war is about to begin, and now they know our capabilities. We need to be ready for them to adapt everything we just showed them. He opened a communication to all human ships. "All fleet commanders, this is Kim. Good work on Corvin. But do not get comfortable. The Devourers are smart and they learn fast. We just showed them our opening moves. Now they will show us theirs. Stay alert, stay ready, and remember why we are here. These people need us, and we do not abandon our responsibilities." Across the galaxy, billions of beings had watched the Battle of Corvin. They saw humans fight with skill and courage. They saw ancient legends become reality. Hope began to spread. The council chamber was full again, but this time Admiral Kim stood before them in person. His physical presence was different from a hologram. The council members could see every detail. The scars on his hands from years of combat. The gray in his hair that spoke of experience. The way he carried himself with quiet confidence. Counselor Vreth watched the human carefully. After the victory at Corvin, public opinion had shifted dramatically. Billions of beings across the galaxy now saw humans as saviors. But Vreth and the other council leaders knew the situation was more complicated than that. Admiral Kim did not waste time with pleasantries. He got straight to the point. The Devourers are testing us. They are learning our tactics. Every battle we win teaches them how to fight us better. We need to adapt faster than they do. That means sharing knowledge, sharing technology, working together as true allies, not just temporary partners. Several council members looked uncomfortable. Ambassador Kelth from the merchant clans spoke up. His species looked like tall, thin creatures with multiple arms. He was known for being cautious and protective of council interests. Kelth said that sharing advanced technology could be dangerous. The council had rules about technology transfer. Rules that existed for good reasons. What happens after the war is over? Would humans use that technology against the council? Admiral Kim turned to face Kelth directly. His expression hardened. Let me be very clear, Ambassador. We do not need your technology. Human science has advanced significantly in 5,000 years. We have weapons and systems you have never seen. But warfare is not just about technology. It is about coordination, communication, trust. Right now you do not trust us, and that makes us less effective as a fighting force. The chamber erupted in arguments. Some species supported Kim. Others sided with Kelth. Vreth tried to maintain order, but the divisions were clear. 5,000 years of peace had made the council unused to making hard decisions quickly. Then Commander Nexith stepped forward. The insect warrior had earned tremendous respect for his defense of Vareth Prime. When he spoke, the chamber quieted. Nexith said he had fought beside humans now. He had seen how they operated. They were aggressive, yes. They were fierce, yes. But they also risked their lives to save civilians they had never met. Human Marines died protecting people from species that had erased them from history. That is not the behavior of conquerors. That is the behavior of protectors. The commander turned to face the entire council. We can debate trust and politics later. Right now people are dying. Worlds are falling. If we do not work together completely, we will all be consumed. The choice is simple. Trust the humans or face extinction alone. Vreth called for a vote. The council agreed to grant Admiral Kim full authority to coordinate the defense. They would share intelligence and allow human advisors to work with council military forces. It was not complete trust, but it was a start. Dr. Hayrin Lee walked through the archives of Kalem with scholar Yemis. The ancient building held records dating back tens of thousands of years. Most of it was accessible to any scholar. But Yemis had special clearance to the forbidden sections. Dr. Lee was fascinated by the galaxy she was discovering. 5,000 years was a long time. Human civilization had continued in isolation, but they had missed so much galactic history. She wanted to understand why the council had been so afraid of humanity. Yemis pulled up ancient records on a display screen. The bird-like scholar moved her wing arms gracefully as she navigated through files. Here, this is what the ancient council recorded about humanity after the First Devourer War. Dr. Lee read the documents carefully. They described human military capabilities in detail. The weapons, the tactics, the psychological profile of human soldiers. But what caught her attention was a section about human culture. The ancient council had been afraid of human ideas. Concepts like individual freedom, the belief that people should choose their own leaders, the idea that citizens had the right to own weapons to defend themselves. To the council, these ideas were dangerous. They could destabilize the careful order that kept 73 different species working together. Dr. Lee felt anger rising in her chest. So they made us leave. Not because we were violent, but because we believed in freedom. Yemis nodded sadly. The ancient council feared that human culture would spread, that other species would start questioning authority, demanding changes. It was easier to make humans disappear than to deal with those questions. Dr. Lee sat down heavily. And now we are back, saving the same people who feared us. The scholar looked at her with wise old eyes. That is what makes humanity remarkable, Dr. Lee. You came back anyway. You could have stayed hidden. You could have let the galaxy burn. But you came to help. That shows more about human character than any amount of fear or suspicion. They spent hours going through the archives. Dr. Lee learned about galactic politics, about the complex relationships between species, about the fragile peace that the Council had maintained. She began to understand both sides. The Council had reason to be cautious, but they had also been wrong. Lieutenant Choi stood in a training facility watching Council soldiers attempt human combat drills. It was not going well. The soldiers were skilled, but they were used to different tactics. They relied heavily on long-range weapons and defensive positions. Human tactics emphasized aggression and rapid movement. Commander Nexith approached Choi. The two had developed an unexpected friendship after fighting together on Corvin. Despite their very different appearances, they understood each other as warriors. Nexith gestured at the struggling troops. They are trying. But this is very different from how we normally fight. Choi nodded. War is different for us. Council species have had peace for so long that warfare became almost theoretical. You train for it, but you do not really expect to fight. Humans never stopped fighting. We had wars in our own space, pirates, rebellions. We stayed sharp. The insect commander tilted his head thoughtfully. Is that why you are so effective? Constant practice? Choi watched the troops for a moment before answering. Practice helps, but it is more than that. Humans understand something about warfare that peaceful societies often forget. War is not about technology or tactics alone. It is about will, the determination to keep fighting no matter how bad things get. We learned that the hard way through thousands of years of our own conflicts. Nexith was quiet for a long time. Then he said something that surprised Choi. I think the ancient council was right to fear you, but they were wrong about why. They feared your weapons and your aggression. But the real threat was always your refusal to give up. An enemy you cannot break is the most dangerous enemy of all. Choi smiled slightly. And now we are on your side. The commander made a clicking sound that Choi had learned meant agreement or satisfaction. Now we are on the same side. And the Devourers will learn why that is a problem for them. In the shadows of council politics, not everyone was happy about the human presence. Ambassador Kelth met secretly with several other council members who shared his concerns. They gathered in a private meeting room far from public recording systems. Kelth spoke to the small group. The humans are becoming too influential too quickly. The public sees them as heroes. But we remember history. We remember why they were sent away. Once the Devourer threat is over, will they leave peacefully? Or will they use their military power to dominate the council? One of the other members agreed. We need insurance. Some way to control them or at least limit their power. What if we restricted their supply lines, made them dependent on us for resources? Kelth nodded slowly. That could work. Subtle delays in logistics. Nothing obvious. Just enough to remind them that they need the council as much as we need them. They began planning in secret. Small acts of sabotage that could be explained as accidents or bureaucratic delays. It was a dangerous game, but they convinced themselves it was necessary. What they did not know was that human intelligence had been monitoring council communications. Captain Park was reading the transcripts of their meeting within hours. Admiral Kim stood in his ready room when Captain Park delivered the report about the sabotage plot. He read it carefully, his expression unreadable. Then he looked up at Park. What do you recommend, Captain? Park thought for a moment. We could expose them publicly, show the council that some of their own members are working against us. That would discredit them, and maybe force the council to take a stronger stance in support of humanity. Kim nodded. That is one option. What is the other option? We could handle it quietly. Talk to Councillor Vreth privately. Let him deal with it internally. That preserves council dignity and shows that we are not trying to humiliate them. The Admiral stood and walked to the window. His ship hung in orbit around a council world. Below them, billions of beings were going about their lives protected by human ships they could not even see. Kim made his decision. We go with option 2. Contact Vreth privately. Show him the evidence. Let him handle Kelth and the others. We are here to protect these people, not to embarrass them, or prove we are better than them. Unity is more important than pride right now. Park smiled slightly. That is why you are the Admiral, sir. Kim turned back to her. No, Captain. That is why we are human. We could Commander Nexith watched the screens with growing horror. The insect-like alien's 4 eyes tracked every movement as green dots representing his ships blinked out one by one. His fleet had come to investigate missing colony vessels near the edge of Council space. What they found was death itself. The enemy ships looked like they were grown rather than built. Massive organic hulls that pulsed with sick light. They moved through space like predators, tearing through his battle group's shields as if they weren't even there. Nexith had commanded fleets for 20 years. He had fought pirates and rebels, but this was different. This was extermination. All ships fall back to Vareth Prime, Nexith ordered into his communicator. His voice remained steady even as his ship shook from another impact. Send priority alert to Council. The Devourers have returned. The word sent chills through his bridge crew. Devourers. The ancient enemy from legends and children's nightmares. They consumed everything, planets, people, entire civilizations. They turned living matter into more of themselves. And they had been gone for 5,000 years until now. His ship barely made it back through hyperspace. When they emerged at Vareth Prime, Nexith immediately contacted the Planetary Defense Force. Within hours, the Devourers arrived. Swarms of organic ships that filled the sky. The planet's weapons did almost nothing. Energy beams that should have destroyed ships just made the Devourer hulls glow brighter. They adapted. They evolved. They learned. Nexith sent one final message to the Galactic Council before his communications went down. The message was simple and terrifying. If they didn't find help soon, every world in the galaxy would fall. Counselor Vreth stood in the center of the council chamber, his reptilian features tight with stress. Around him, holographic projections showed representatives from 73 different species. They all looked worried. Some looked terrified. 3 worlds have gone silent in the past week, Vreth said. Our military forces report the same thing Commander Nexith witnessed. The Devourers are back and our weapons are ineffective. Panic rippled through the chamber. Species began arguing over where to send their fleets, where to evacuate civilians, how to defend against an enemy that seemed unstoppable. Vreth tried to maintain order, but even he felt the fear creeping in. An elderly bird-like alien named Scholar Yemis spoke up. Her voice was quiet but clear. There may be another option. In the Forbidden Archives there are records of the last Devourer War. Records that mention a species that fought them successfully. Vreth frowned. You mean the human myths? Scholar Yemis, we've been over this. Humans were stories invented to give people hope. They never existed. I have studied those archives for 40 years, Yemis replied. The records are too detailed to be fiction. Humans were real. They fought the Devourers 5,000 years ago and won. Then the council made them disappear. Silence fell. Several council members looked uncomfortable. Vreth's throat went dry. Are you suggesting the council deliberately erased an entire species from history? Not erased, Yemis said. Hidden. The ancient council feared human military power. They feared human culture and ideas. So after the Devourers were defeated, they made humans leave. The council sealed away their homeworld and deleted most records. They wanted the galaxy to forget. More arguments erupted. Some council members called it conspiracy theory. Others demanded to see the archives. But Vreth felt something cold in his chest. What if it was true? What if they had thrown away their only hope because of ancient fear? Commander Nexith's voice suddenly crackled through the communication system. He was still on Vareth Prime, still fighting. Council, we're losing. If anyone can hear me, if there's any truth to the old stories about the warriors from Earth, now would be a really good time for them to show up. Yemis moved quickly to a console. Her wing-like arms worked fast as she pulled up ancient star charts. The old records mentioned coordinates. A region of space declared off-limits 5,000 years ago. If humans still exist, they would be there. She transmitted a signal, an old frequency pattern mentioned in the forbidden texts. A call for help sent into empty space toward a hidden world called Earth. Nobody expected an answer. The signal was probably reaching nothing but dead space. Just another desperate act by people facing extinction. Then the console beeped. A response came through, clear and strong. A voice speaking in an unknown language that the translation systems took a moment to process. When the translation came through, every being in the council chamber froze. Terran Expeditionary Fleet receiving your distress call. We are en route. Hold your position. Help is coming. On Vareth Prime, Commander Nexith watched the Devourer ships closing in. His ammunition was almost gone. His shields were failing. He prepared to give the order to evacuate the civilian shelters even though he knew they wouldn't all make it out. Then his sensor officer shouted, "Commander, hyperspace signatures. Hundreds of them. No, thousands." Nexith looked at his screens. His breath caught. Ships were emerging from hyperspace all around the planet, but these weren't Council designs. These ships were angular and aggressive, covered in armor plating and weapon systems. They looked like they were built for one purpose only: war. The lead ship was massive, 5 kilometers long, bristling with gun turrets and missile batteries. It positioned itself between Vareth Prime and the Devourer swarm. A communication channel opened. A human face appeared on the screen. The alien looked similar to several other species but with distinct differences. Weathered features, sharp eyes, an expression that spoke of experience and determination. The human wore a dark uniform with symbols that must have indicated high rank. "This is Admiral Taewon Kim of the Terran Expeditionary Fleet," the human said. His voice was calm, almost casual. "Commander Nexith, pull your forces back. We'll handle the Devourers." Nexith could barely speak. "Admiral, humans are real." A slight smile crossed the human's face. "Very real, Commander. And we remember what the Council did to us 5,000 years ago. But we can discuss that later. Right now, we have some old enemies to deal with." The human fleet moved forward. Nexith watched in awe as they engaged the Devourers. What happened next would be talked about across the galaxy for generations. The humans fought with a combination of tactics and raw firepower that was completely different from Council military doctrine. Their weapons weren't just energy beams. They used solid projectiles moving at incredible speeds. They used explosive missiles. They used coordinated strike patterns that overwhelmed the Devourer swarms. Most importantly, they fought with an intensity that seemed almost frightening. These weren't reluctant defenders. These were warriors who had been preparing for this fight for 5,000 years. In less than an hour, the Devourer forces around Vareth Prime were destroyed. The human fleet secured orbit and began scanning for any remaining threats. Admiral Kim's face appeared on Nexith's screen again. "Commander, you're safe for now. But this is just the beginning." The Devourers came back in force, which means there are more of them out there. Many more. Your Council needs to understand something very clearly. Nexith nodded slowly. "What's that, Admiral?" The human's expression grew hard. "You erased us from history because you were afraid of what we could do. You made us leave because you thought we were too dangerous. Well, guess what? Now you need us. And we're going to save your civilization whether you like it or not. After that, we'll talk about why you shouldn't make your protectors disappear." The transmission ended. Nexith sat back in his command chair, trying to process what had just happened. Humans were real. The legends were true, and judging by what he had just witnessed, the galaxy had made a terrible mistake 5,000 years ago. Because now that the humans had returned, everything was about to change. The Battle of Helios Station would be remembered as the longest and bloodiest fight of the war. The station was a massive structure orbiting a gas giant. It served as a critical supply hub for both military and civilian operations. If it fell, the entire defensive line would collapse. Admiral Kim had positioned his forces carefully. Human battleships formed the outer defensive perimeter. Council ships held the middle positions. Close-range defense platforms covered the station itself. It looked strong on paper, but the Devourer force approaching was overwhelming. Captain Park commanded the tactical operations from the Relentless. She watched the sensor readings with growing concern. The Devourers were not rushing in mindlessly like before. They moved with calculated precision. They were using formations that minimized exposure to human weapons while maximizing their own offensive capabilities. Park opened communication to Admiral Kim. "Sir, they have adapted our entire tactical doctrine. They know our weapon ranges. They know our standard formations. Everything we showed them at Corvin they have countered." Kim nodded from the bridge of the Indomitable Will. "Then we stop using standard tactics. Captain, you have full authority to improvise. Show them something new." Park smiled. She had been hoping for those exact words. "All ships prepare for maneuver pattern Whiskey Charlie. Engineering reroute power from shields to engines on my mark." Her officers looked shocked. They would be dropping shields in the middle of combat. But Park had a plan. The Devourers had learned to counter human tactics by studying past battles. They were predictable in their adaptation, so Park would do something no sane commander would normally attempt. The human destroyers suddenly surged forward at maximum speed. No shields, no defensive formation, just pure aggressive acceleration straight into the Devourer fleet. The organic ships tried to adjust, but they were too slow. They had positioned themselves to counter long-range weapons. They were not ready for point-blank combat. Park ordered fire when they reached minimum range. Railguns fired continuously, missiles launched at such close distance that the Devourers could not dodge. The human ships tore through the enemy formation like sharks through a school of fish. They took damage. They lost ships. But they created massive chaos in the Devourer ranks. Admiral Kim watched the maneuver with a mixture of pride and worry. Then he opened fleet-wide communications. All ships execute Plan Anvil. We hold here. No retreat. No surrender. On the planet Sanctuary, Lieutenant Choi received the worst possible news. A Devourer strike force had broken through the orbital defenses. Landing pods were falling toward the surface. The planet held 3 billion refugees from worlds that had already fallen. If the Devourers reached them, it would be a massacre. Choi had only 5,000 Marines on the planet. Against millions of Devourer organisms, it should have been hopeless. But he was not going to let these people die. Not while he still breathed. He gathered his forces at the landing zones. Commander Nexith stood beside him with his own troops. The insect warrior had refused evacuation. He would fight here with the humans and die with them if necessary. Choi spoke to his Marines over the communications network. Listen up, we are outnumbered. We are probably going to die here. But 3 billion people are depending on us, so we hold this line. We make the Devourers pay for every meter of ground, and we buy time for the evacuation ships to get everyone off this planet. Are you with me? The response came back as a roar. Thousands of voices, human and alien, united. We are with you. The Devourer pods hit the ground and split open. What emerged was nightmare made real. The creatures had evolved since Corvin. They were bigger, stronger, faster. They had adapted armor-like shells that could resist small arms fire. They moved with terrifying intelligence. The battle was brutal from the first second. Choi led from the front, fighting alongside his troops. His armor was covered in blood, both red human blood and the black ichor of Devourer creatures. He lost soldiers every minute. Good people who died protecting others, but the Marines held. They used every weapon they had. They set traps. They collapsed buildings on advancing creatures. They fought with rifles, knives in bare hands when ammunition ran out. The Devourers pushed forward, but they could not break through. Commander Nexith fought beside Choi back to back. The insect warrior used his natural weapons, claws and mandibles alongside human firearms. At one point he pulled Choi out of the way of a charging creature, saving the human's life. Choi looked at him. Thanks, Commander. Nexith made his clicking sound. We protect each other. That is what warriors do. The fight lasted 72 hours. 3 days of continuous combat with no rest. Marines fell asleep standing up and woke when Devourers attacked. They were beyond exhaustion, beyond fear. They fought because there was nothing else to do. Finally, the evacuation ships reported that all civilians were off-world. Sanctuary was empty except for the defenders and the Devourers. Choi received orders to fall back to the final extraction point. Of his original 5,000 Marines, less than 2,000 were still alive. They fought their way back meter by meter. The extraction ships came in under heavy fire. Choi made sure every surviving Marine got on board before he took the last seat himself. As the ships lifted off, he looked down at Sanctuary. The planet was lost, but 3 billion people lived because of what his Marines had done. That had to be enough. Dr. Hayrin Lee worked without sleep in her laboratory aboard the Indomitable Will. She had been studying Devourer biology since the war began. Every battle provided new samples. Every engagement gave her more data. And finally she had found something. The Devourers were not random creatures. They were coordinated by something. A hive mind of sorts, but more sophisticated than that. Scholar Yemis had helped her cross-reference ancient records with current data. Together they discovered the truth. Every Devourer organism was connected to a central intelligence. Not just connected, but actually part of it. The Devourer Prime was not a single creature. It was a network spread across millions of bioships and organisms. To truly defeat them, you had to destroy the core of that network. Dr. Lee rushed to Admiral Kim's ready room. She burst in without announcing herself. Sir, I know how to beat them. Kim was reviewing casualty reports. His face showed the strain of command. Every name on those lists was a person he had sent into battle. but he immediately focused on Dr. Lee. Tell me. She pulled up holographic displays showing the Devourer network structure. There is a central nexus, a biological command center that coordinates everything. It is not in any of the ships we have fought. It is somewhere else, somewhere hidden. If we can find it and destroy it, the entire Devourer force becomes mindless. They lose their intelligence, their coordination, their ability to adapt. Kim studied the data carefully. Where is this nexus? Dr. Lee hesitated. That is the problem, sir. My analysis suggests it is in the void, the region of space where no stars exist, where the Devourers originally came from millions of years ago. It is their home territory. The Admiral stood and walked to his window. The void, the darkest part of the galaxy. Going there would mean taking the fleet into unknown territory with no support. It would be the ultimate gamble, but it might be the only way to end this war. Kim made his decision. Gather all senior officers. We are planning an offensive into the void. Tell them to bring their best ideas because we are going to need them. The Battle of Helios Station ended after 5 days of continuous fighting. The defensive line held but barely. Hundreds of ships were destroyed. Tens of thousands of crew members died, but the Devourers were pushed back. Captain Park brought her battered destroyer back to the fleet. She had won Tactical Brilliance Awards for her performance, but she felt no pride. She kept thinking about the ships that did not make it back. Admiral Kim called a fleet-wide meeting. Every surviving commander attended either in person or by hologram. The mood was grim. They had won battles, but they were losing the war. The Devourers kept coming. They kept adapting. Eventually, they would overwhelm the defenses. Kim did not sugarcoat the situation. We are losing. Not today. Not this week. But we cannot sustain this level of casualties indefinitely. The Devourers can replace their losses faster than we can. We need to change the entire nature of this war. We need to go on the offensive. He activated the holographic display showing Dr. Lee's research. There is a central nexus that controls all Devourer forces. It is located in the void. We are going to take a strike force there and destroy it. This will end the Devourer threat permanently. The officers looked shocked. Counselor Vreth, who was attending the meeting, spoke up. Admiral, that is a suicide mission. The void is Devourer territory. You would be surrounded by enemies with no escape route. Kim nodded. Yes, Counselor. It probably is a suicide mission. But it is our only real chance at victory. If we destroy the Nexus, the Devourers become mindless beasts. Your ships can handle mindless beasts, so we take the risk. Captain Park stood. I volunteer to lead the strike force, Admiral. Lieutenant Choi voice came through the hologram. My Marines volunteer for ground operations if needed. Commander Nexith stepped forward. The Hive Collective volunteers our fastest ships. We will die with honor beside our human allies. One by one, other commanders volunteered. Species that had never trusted each other were now willing to die together. The war had forged them into something the galaxy had never seen before. The fleet gathered at the edge of known space. Over 10,000 warships from 50 different species. It was the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. Human dreadnoughts, council carriers, insect swarm fighters. Every species that could fight had sent their best. Admiral Kim stood on the bridge of the Indomitable Will looking at the fleet display. These ships represented hope. They represented courage, and many of them would not return. He felt the weight of that responsibility like a physical burden. Captain Park approached him quietly. The fleet is ready, Admiral. All ships report prepared for hyperspace jump. We are waiting on your order, Kim nodded. He opened fleet-wide communication so every ship could hear him. This is Admiral Kim. In a few minutes we jump into the void. We are going into the heart of enemy territory to destroy the Devourer Nexus and end this war. Many of you come from species that were enemies a few months ago. Now you fight as brothers and sisters. That transformation is humanity's greatest achievement. Not our weapons, not our tactics, but our ability to unite others in common cause. He paused, letting his words sink in. The Devourers believe they are inevitable. They believe they will consume the galaxy, but they have never faced a united force like this. They have never faced beings who refuse to surrender. Today we show them that life defeats death, that courage defeats fear, that together we are unstoppable. The communication channels lit up with responses. Warriors from 100 worlds shouting their readiness. Kim smiled. All ships, jump on my mark. 3, 2, 1, execute. The fleet vanished into hyperspace. Destination the void. The void was unlike anywhere else in the galaxy. No stars, no planets, just empty darkness stretching forever. It was here in this lightless place that the Devourers had originated millions of years ago. And it was here they had built their greatest stronghold. When the fleet emerged from hyperspace, they found themselves surrounded. Millions of Devourer bioships waited for them. The enemy had known they were coming. This was a trap, but Kim had expected that. All ships engaged defensive formations. Cover each other. Watch your sectors, and trust your training, Kim ordered calmly. The battle began instantly. The Devourers attacked from all sides, trying to overwhelm the fleet with sheer numbers. But the Allied forces were ready. They had trained for this. Human ships provided heavy firepower. Council vessels used energy weapons to fill gaps. Smaller fighters darted between capital ships, targeting weak points. It was the largest space battle ever fought. Ships exploded every second. Weapons fire lit up the darkness like artificial stars. The scale was beyond comprehension. Hundreds of thousands of beings fighting and dying in the void. But while the main fleet drew the Devourer attention, Captain Park executed the real plan. The Eclipse was a prototype, stealth ship built specifically for this mission. It used experimental technology that let it phase through solid matter. Captain Park commanded a crew of 20, all volunteers, all knowing this was likely a one-way trip. Dr. Lee was aboard monitoring the Devourer network signals. She guided Park through the battlefield using the chaos as cover. The Eclipse slipped between fighting ships invisible to sensors. It moved deeper into the void, following the strongest signal. Lieutenant Choi commanded the Marine complement, 50 of the best soldiers in the fleet. If they reached the Nexus, they would need to fight their way inside. The Eclipse traveled for hours through the darkness. Finally, Dr. Lee pointed at her displays. There. That is the Nexus. That massive structure ahead. Park looked at what her sensors showed. The Nexus was enormous, a biological structure the size of a small moon. It pulsed with bioelectric energy. Millions of neural connections running through it. This was the brain of the Devourer Prime. The consciousness that coordinated everything, and it was aware of them. Devourer defender organisms swarmed toward the Eclipse. Park pushed the engines to maximum. The ship shook as it accelerated. They had to reach the Nexus before being destroyed. Choi prepared his Marines. Get ready. We are going in hot. The Eclipse crashed through the outer membrane of the Nexus. The ship tore through biological tissue and came to rest deep inside. Alarms blared. Hull breaches everywhere. But they were inside. Park opened the bay doors. Choi led his Marines out into the nightmare interior of the Nexus. The walls were alive. Organic material that moved and breathed. Defender organisms rushed at them from all directions. The Marines fought their way deeper. Every meter was paid for in blood. Soldiers fell, but the survivors pushed forward. Choi was in front, using his experience from dozens of battles to lead them through the chaos. Dr. Lee guided them through communication. The central chamber is ahead. That is where the primary consciousness resides. You need to reach it and plant the charges. They reached the central chamber and found something unexpected. The Devourer Prime was not a creature. It was a massive neural network suspended in biological fluid. Billions of connections forming a consciousness that had existed for millions of years, and it spoke to them. The voice came through their communicators, ancient, vast, completely inhuman. So the humans return. I remember you from the ancient war. You were young then, aggressive and chaotic. I thought time would make you weaker. Instead, you grew stronger, Captain Park responded. We are here to end you, to free the galaxy from your threat forever. The Prime made a sound like laughter. And me, I am eternal. I have consumed 1,000 civilizations. I have existed since before your species learned to make fire. You cannot kill what is beyond death. Choi placed the antimatter charges around the chamber. His Marines defended him from attacking organisms. He looked at the neural network with disgust. You are not beyond death. You are just afraid of it. That makes you weak. The Prime focused on him. Weak? I have conquered worlds while your ancestors lived in caves. I have adapted to every weapon, survived every attack. What makes you think you can succeed where countless others failed? Park answered before Choi could. Because we do not fight alone. Because we united species that you thought could never work together. Because we refuse to surrender even when facing extinction. Those are things you cannot understand. And that is why you will lose. The charges were set. Choi signaled to his remaining Marines. We need to evacuate now. We have 2 minutes before detonation. They ran back through the corridors. Devourer organisms tried to stop them, but the Marines fought through. Behind them, the Prime was silent. Perhaps it finally understood that this time would be different. They reached the eclipse. The ship was badly damaged. Dr. Lee worked frantically at the controls. I can get us away from the blast radius, but the hyperspace drive is offline. We will be trapped here. Park made a decision. Get everyone else off. Use the escape pods. They can be picked up by the fleet. I will stay and pilot the ship to make sure the charges detonate properly. Choi refused. Captain, we are not leaving you. Park smiled sadly. That is an order, Lieutenant. Someone needs to tell the Admiral that we succeeded. Someone needs to make sure this war ends. That someone is you. Dr. Lee looked at her friend. Park, no. There has to be another way. There is not. And you know it. Now go. That is my final order as captain of this vessel. Choi saluted. His eyes were wet. It has been an honor serving with you, Captain. The honor was mine, Lieutenant. Now save these people. That is what we do. That is what humans do. They evacuated. 20 pods launched from the eclipse carrying the survivors. Park watched them go. Then she turned back to the controls. She piloted the damaged ship deeper into the nexus, making sure she was at the exact center when the charges detonated. In her final moments, she thought about Earth, about the family she would never see again, about the future she was giving to others. It was enough. It had to be enough. The antimatter charges exploded. The eclipse and everything around it vanished in a burst of pure energy. The explosion created a singularity, a tiny black hole that consumed the entire nexus. The Devourer Prime Consciousness screamed once as it was torn apart. Then silence. On the bridge of the indomitable will, Admiral Kim was locked in desperate combat when every sensor went silent. The Devourer ships all around them stopped moving. They drifted in space lifeless. The neural connection to the Prime was severed. They were just empty shells now. Kim looked at his displays in disbelief. Then he saw the escape pods. 20 small signatures in the darkness. His people. Park's crew, but no eclipse. So Captain Park. He knew immediately what had happened. Park had stayed behind. She had sacrificed herself to ensure the mission succeeded. Kim closed his eyes for a moment. Another good person gone. Another name added to the list of those he had sent to die. But her sacrifice meant victory. The Devourer threat was ended. The galaxy was saved. Kim opened fleet communications. All ships cease fire. The Devourers are defeated. Begin search and rescue operations. Find every survivor. Bring them home. The battle was over. After months of fighting, after millions of casualties, after countless sacrifices, it was finally over. The fleet returned to Council space as heroes. Billions watched their arrival. Every species celebrated. Human ships flew alongside alien vessels. Warriors who had been strangers now fought as family. The Council held a memorial ceremony for those who fell. Captain Ji-Woo Park's name was at the top of the list. ADM,